I recently received an email that asked me whether or not it's possible to successfully complete a PhD program if you have ADHD. I think the reason I was asked this is that I have periodically alluded to being vaguely on the spectrum of ADHD, I believe. Now, so I do have some insights and strategies and a basic answer to this question. However, I should start by saying this is not going to be any kind of clinical advice, and to be perfectly frank, ADHD has never been debilitating for me. I think I am on the spectrum, so I think I do have some things to share, but if you have severe ADHD, I cannot tell you whether or not you can do a PhD. I can't really relate to severe debilitating ADHD. So if that's you, this doesn't apply to you. But if you're like me and you're kind of maybe on the spectrum of ADHD, you have some behaviors or tendencies that sound a bit like ADHD symptoms. To be honest, many people do, right? But in that case, then I would like to share some of the insights that I have gained from doing a PhD myself and struggling with many tendencies that are often associated with ADHD. First, my basic answer to the question is you absolutely can do a PhD successfully if you are on the spectrum of ADHD, so long as it's not severe debilitating ADHD, you absolutely can successfully complete a PhD, even if you have pretty bad struggles with getting distracted and various behaviors or tendencies that are often associated with ADHD. And in fact, the insights I'm going to suggest and explain here probably are also relevant and useful to people who just simply have problems with procrastination more generally, even if you don't see yourself as possibly on the spectrum of ADHD. Probably the most basic and simple way to summarize the essential problem for people on the spectrum of ADHD and just people who have problems with distractibility and procrastination more generally is the basic problem of not being able to do what you have to do. So you have a certain amount of work that needs to be done, and a lot of people just have a hard time sitting down and forcing themselves to do what has to be done. Now, if this is something that you struggle with, there are ways that you can kind of hack your system, if you will. You can kind of hack your rhythm, I think, in a way that allows you to do a lot of focused, productive, disciplined work over a certain period of time, even if you have this problem. So I want to talk about basically three main strategies that I used in my PhD program to get through and successfully complete a PhD and go on to, succeed in academia and all of that. By the way, I've also supervised PhD students, so you can take what I'm saying with at least a little bit of authority. The first tactic or strategy that I would recommend is generally trying to think of ways that you can make your distractibility productive. There's a really good website called Structured Procrastination. It's a famous essay. I don't know if you would have heard of it, but it's written by a professor at Stanford named John Perry. And it's a short essay, but it's quite famous. And the basic idea of that is the basic idea that I'm going to put forward to you, and kind of, I guess, in my own way, with my own twist. And it's basically the idea that you should think about all the tasks that you have to do and think about the tasks that you generally like to do and organize them in a way, create lists for yourself in a way that allows you to feel like you're being irresponsible or feel like you're fucking off on the thing you're supposed to be doing and you're getting distracted and getting obsessed with something else, but that something else that you get distracted by is also productive work. So you want to kind of think about the full range of things that you have to do. Think of the tasks that you have to do, but you don't like doing. But then think about also the tasks that do make you enthusiastic, that if you think about what you often get distracted by, you can think about various forms of work that are consistent with your distractible tendencies and that you actually will find yourself doing almost by accident because you're distracted, but cultivate those and enumerate those in a way that if you do them a lot, it actually ends up being productive and contributes to at least perceptions of your reliability or responsibility, or can, in the long run, those things can be kind of crafted into their own high value projects potentially. So that's a kind of general principle I would urge. And I think I spent a lot of time in my PhD learning how to do this because I hate doing things that I'm told I have to do, but there are lots of things that if I just let myself do it, especially if I feel like I'm, fucking off on the man and his oppressive system, that I can actually do really well and for long hours if I feel like I'm, taking freedom for myself to do it. But what I did with my PhD was the stuff that I got obsessed with and easily distracted by, I did enough of it and it was relevant and closely related enough to my main PhD work that I was able to basically kind of convert my distractibility into valuable outputs that fed back into the work that I was supposed to be doing, which I was often kind of slacking on. So in that way, so that's a basic principle. So I can give you some examples based on my own field, which is political science. Your mileage might vary depending on the situation that you're in and the type of work that you're doing. More generally, I should say that your mileage will vary on the general advice I'm giving, probably significantly depending on the kind of field you're in. So be that as it may. I often was not very interested in the books that I was assigned to read. So what I would do is I would read them as quickly as I possibly could. I would just get really good at grokking the basic insight and findings of the books I had to read as quickly as possible. But then I would spend a lot of my free time, probably more time than the average good student was spending. I would spend that time reading the books that I wanted to read. That's just a basic example. And, as long as you still put the hours in, as long as you're still working hard in a sense, this is an example of how to make your distractibility productive. So if you think you're not going to read the books you're assigned to read in grad school, you better have a big ass stack of books that you're actually really personally interested in. And when you're getting distracted by what you're supposed to be doing, be reading all of those books. Another example would be in my PhD program, I was specializing in statistical modeling of various kinds. And often, in the statistics classes that I was taking, you had to do fairly, conventional, normal assignments that weren't very interesting. And of course, I would probably put those off. I probably could have done better on many of those. But when I was supposed to be doing my homework on those problems, I was actually spending a lot of time tinkering with statistical models that were more advanced than I was even supposed to be tinkering with, because that excited me. That made me feel interested. And it was a problem of distractibility. I was constantly kind of getting ahead of myself, but that's kind of just how I work, and I embraced it. And so I did kind of often slack on the work I was supposed to be doing, but I ended up doing enough of what I was genuinely interested in. I got distracted enough on a scale that was sufficient to actually make me come out quite ahead of a lot of the other students. So I embraced my distractibility and made it productive. And so that would just be another example. Another basic strategy I would suggest to people who want to do a PhD but struggle with mild forms of ADHD or just general distractibility or procrastination is alternating and sequencing the types of work that make you interested and that you are enthusiastic about and that you find satisfying with the other types of work that you have to get done, but you often don't really want to get done or have a real problem doing. So what I would often do is, I would develop a sense of what I enjoy doing and what I didn't enjoy doing. And I would force myself to do the work I had to do, but didn't like doing, by doing just a small bit of it. And then I would allow myself to just go do something else that I found fun. And then after, maybe 20 minutes of the thing I found fun, I forced myself to do another 30 minutes or something like that of the work that I didn't like doing. So kind of using your distractibility and your desire for doing something else, use that as a kind of carrot to motivate you to do at least small sprints, but efficient sprints of the work that you have to do. So yeah, I would think of that alternation and sequencing both on a kind of day-to-day level, but also in a kind of longer term sense. So I might intersperse these different types of work every 20 minutes, but you also sometimes, you're going to have to buckle down and do certain sprint, like long focused marathons of work that you don't necessarily want to do. But when you're done with that, you can kind of reward yourself with like 3 whole days of just doing whatever you want to do or something like that. So kind of planning and anticipating your distractibility in the short run, but also in a kind of medium run also is something that, I did a lot, and I think that's helpful. So just generally experiment with alternating and sequencing different types of work. Finally, the last thing I would say is that a crucial facet of this type of strategy to be really successful, to not just get through a PhD program and pass it, but to do really well. In my case, I actually did end up doing quite well. I excelled. I was, if you asked any of my supervisors, I think it's fair to say that I stood out as an exceptional student, and I went on to do quite well in academia. The real key to succeeding, not just surviving with this type of distractibility problem, is that you have to overcompensate with your enthusiasm. And so up until now in this video, I've kind of been giving you strategies for how you can kind of balance out your problem. But the real trick is that you can kind of see your distractibility as a superpower if you know how to channel it. The mistake that a lot of people make is that when they get distracted and interested in something else that's not what they're supposed to be doing, they feel bad about it and they kind of shame themselves and they want to cut off that distracted, enthusiastic interest. Whereas what I would do is I would accept it and embrace it, and I would actually allow myself to go off for 12 hours doing that thing. I would get good at it though. And because I followed the step one bit of advice that I gave you in this video, which is I made my distractible interests themselves kind of aligned with what I was supposed to be doing, at least tangentially aligned, I could use the 12 hours of enthusiastic distraction to overcompensate for the 3 hours of work that I was neglecting. So in this kind of weird way, if you embrace and accept and even cultivate your distractibility, as long as you've structured it in the right way, you can actually come out in the end as a superior student to the ones who are just able to do their 3 hours of work that they have to do. But that's a matter of embracing it and cultivating it and actually reorganizing all of your plans and projects and your whole kind of vision of what your work looks like and what your long-term project will look like. You have to kind of revise it and revision it, reframe it around precisely the types of work that make you distracted, but which you can get enthusiastically interested in. So that's basically what I did. I kind of hacked my entire PhD studies around this kind of weird psychology of mine. And I'm not sure how much it generalizes. As I said, if you have clinical problems of ADHD or whatever it might be, I'm not pretending that my advice is going to help you, but I suspect there are a lot of people out there with kind of moderate forms of distractibility or kind of on the spectrum ADHD that these three basic pieces of advice I think probably could help a lot of people. So thank you. I just wanted to put them on the record.